was a concurrent Zoom, so I'm just joining now. Actually, a Zoom organized by this pan-European consortium called PEP-PT. That is also aiming for a privacy-preserving a contact tracing application that would also be multinational, or at least it would be possible to exchange these tokens or these IDs that Marten was talking about between different countries, so that hopefully travel would become possible. This is a good goal, I suppose, but there is also lots of questions about the actual technical direction of the PEP-PT consortium. And I didn't learn that much about it, regrettably, but it's an ongoing question. So I think I should keep it just very short. There are various activities on in the CWI about COVID-19. So Peter Grunwald talked about his vision, and the concern that we initially had led to the start of our activities, but by now it's modeling and also modeling the possible effects of the of an app like this. That is interesting, because it's of course an interesting question how much an app would help to slow down the disease. This is important to know, especially also the question on how many people would need to adopt this kind of solution in order for this approach to effectively slow down. So what's the relationship between a reduction in R0 and the adoption of such a contact tracing app? Other questions which are of interest, but before deploying them is about the amount of testing that would need to be done, and the throughput of testing that would need to be available in order to make a contact tracing app like this possible, or what would be the limits really of that. And that again has that has consequences for the moment and the levels of contagion that need to be reached. So how low does the amount of contagion needs to be before we can get out of a lockdown? So all these models, I mean, we are not the only ones working on them, for sure. RIVM is also trying to do this, or they are primarily responsible, but various people at the CWI are working on this. So I know that Daniel de Douche, for instance, with some people are working on this, and Bert Zwart is working on this, also trying to incorporate uncertainty quantification in these models. But I think I should keep it short and just say thank you to everybody at CWI who has been trying to contribute to this effort.
All right, thanks, Peter. That's I think that then concludes the last three talks. But now we have time for some questions. So if I scroll up, I see there was a question for Peter Grunwald about R0, which he already addressed. But there was also another question about R0. This was: is there a neutral environment for the R0? Because it could vary quite a bit depending on social structures, population density, etc. So maybe that's something that Peter Grunwald could talk about if he's unmuted. Yeah, he's unmuted.
Yes, so the question is, is this R0 defined in some kind of neutral environment? And I think the answer is this R0 is a big idealization anyway. It's like many parameters that you try to learn in statistics, it doesn't really exist. And whether it's a good way of thinking about it or not is not so clear. In many cases, it does seem to be a good way of thinking about it. But you do see that some of the limitations, so people are trying to estimate it, which is of course very difficult because of the reasons I said that.
The coronavirus outbreak.
So in the estimation methods they use, one of the problems is indeed that they, at least in the basis estimation methods, they act as if it would be kind of the same in a whole country, which is evidently false, right? It's something which changes from region to region and is different from age group to age group. So this is a real concern. But still, yeah, it's what we have. I do know that at the most RIVM, they are trying to kind of, they have something like localized R's, but how this works exactly, I don't know.
All right, thanks, Peter. Let's see, were there more questions for Peter? I think there were a number of questions. So Abdallah, please.
Yes, so for Martin's talk, there's a question from Linda. How about the contact with individuals 14 days before one shows symptoms? So maybe Martin, you can comment on this?
Yeah, so the idea is that when you do show symptoms or when you test positively, you will actually share your seed of 14 days ago. And then that would be the first day that you could potentially be contagious. And so from that day forward, you want to share essentially all your IDs that you could have broadcasted to others with the GGD. And as such, all the other people in the Netherlands can compare to that list of yours to see whether they were in contact with you. And if that happened for a long period, if that was during the most contagious period that was maybe the case for you, then your risk score for some other person may start to increase. And then when it hits a threshold, you should go for a test.
All right, Abdallah, do you have further questions for Martin?
There was a comment from Jos about Margaret having a smartphone, but I think this relates to a general problem that Martin mentioned, which is this requires people to actually install this app, activate it, and then there's Bluetooth's amazing reliability.
Yeah, so to say a little bit here, all the modeling that is being done at CWI and elsewhere is also about measuring the effectiveness of such a type of application. So if there's an adoption rate of say 70% or 60% or what is needed in order to make this effective? We don't know. I think there was also a question about the seeds that was actually answered by Mark. Yeah, by just communicating a seed, that's much more efficient. Otherwise, your throughput may go down, and that's way better to do it like that. And when you are healthy, then you may not need an app anymore. But on the other hand, you really do not know yet whether immunity is as clear for this disease as what people may say. So maybe some more understanding from the GGD by collecting data would be helpful if in case you do get sick again.
And there's one more question for you, Martin. Would the GGD ever be interested in finding out who you got it from to see if they're missing sick cases?
They should not be interested in exactly who it is, like your name, like your social security number, if you will, and all of that information. No, they just need to do statistics. What would be interesting for them is to know maybe the area where you come from, maybe your postcode, your zip code, because that may be related to what kind of resources are needed in a certain region. So one can imagine that kind of additional data may also be transmitted during a Bluetooth exchange.
And I think then there's a final question for you from Monique Laurent. What about false positives? How far does Bluetooth reach and through the walls of your apartment?
Yeah, Bluetooth unfortunately can reach into the other room. Well, there's a wall in between, so clearly a virus cannot penetrate that. So there will be false positives this way. So how can this be mitigated somewhat? Well, maybe you want to check the signal strength of Bluetooth, and maybe that can relate somewhat to how far away you are, but it also depends on your battery power. So that's kind of fuzzy. But there's a whole team, and I'm not an expert in that, working also related to a company at ETH, Kapshun is his last name, and they're doing lots of experiments. And they have a company in this type of area. So hopefully they come up with a good solution. But we also should take into account that maybe other types of distance proximity measurements can be done, like a real handshake protocol where your mobile phone and the other mobile phone are using near field communication and touch one another almost. Or, but that takes action from the humans, and maybe adoption will not be that high. Or we have high-pitched tones that can be used as a communication channel, and actually you can do pretty accurate communication over that. I happen to know, but that could be used, and that's not penetrating the walls.
All right.
So it's an open question. Experiments need to be done. Trials.
Yeah, yeah. So then, as the really final question to you, there's a question from Frans Kuik.
Oh.
And I think his question, if I got it correctly through Dick, is that maybe some people could actually, on purpose, mess up with the data that you've been collecting. So they could, I don't know, like what would you do against, say, some potential attacker who wanted to disrupt the data gathering?
Well, first of all, depends a little bit on what kind of disruption you're talking about. So if someone wants to submit a wrong key, say a wrong seed, that doesn't matter, because it will not create any match with all the other logs that are collected by all the other human beings in the Netherlands. Simply because we work with cryptography and we have these security parameters, so you can make it negligibly small. But what you could do is maybe, and that is my fear, is that an application on its own can be hacked into, right? So potentially, so you need to be very careful about how that is coded up, and what do you need to trust on your mobile phone in order to also trust this app, because it's very sensitive in a sense. And that relates to, for example, the type of operating systems that you use on your phones, and can you trust that, etc., or do you do some compartmentalization and so forth. But other types of attacks are maybe someone who's driving over the street and is collecting Bluetooth signals everywhere as much as he or she can, and in that way try to collect information about healthy people and how they connect together. Now that's kind of a niche type of attack. But you could defend against that. That is all. You can read the documentation for DP3T on that. But now we're talking about very niche attacks. So large-scale attacks, I only see happening when you break into the apps themselves, or you hack into those.
All right. Thanks a lot. Maybe
question from Fons. If people are reporting sick while they're not actually sick, so this relates to the extreme testing case. So this can really add a lot of noise into everything, whether we have Bluetooth tracing or not. Maybe you could say something about this, Martin?
Sorry, so there is a noise, like
So that if people are reporting being sick, well, they're not actually sick, because right now, if I get just a slight cold, I actually think I have this virus.
Yeah. So that's why you need to do local risk assessment. Your application should do that, and you should definitely not get into panic or so, right? So you need to set a threshold up to a certain level that you may start to lower. The more capacity we get in the hospitals, or test capacity we get, you can maybe lower that threshold. But other than that, this is just looking at whether you have been in touch with infected people, and it's all about the test capacity that we can have, and you need to set the thresholds properly. So it's not about making people panic here, of course, and that's we should keep common sense. And if you have symptoms of some kind yourself, you also have to use common sense and be a little bit realistic about what's going on.
All right. Let's also continue with a question that Peter Grunwald has already answered partially in the chat. But I think this was about expanding the IC capacity. So Peter, could you maybe comment on that, Peter Grunwald, if you're still there?
Yes, so there were questions about by Ronald de Wolf about can't we maybe somehow increase the number of beds on the IC to 12,000 instead of 2,000, so that we could develop herd immunity faster. And Harold answered that, well, at this point that would be impossible because there's just there's just not enough personnel. That's really the bottleneck, more than the number of beds. And then Ronald said, well, maybe in the long term, maybe you could teach some doctors to become emergency room doctors, etc. So, because like an IC bed, said Ronald, is about €1 million a year. That seems really a lot, but the economic damage that's done by keeping in lockdown for very long is much worse than that even. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what will happen in the future, but of course, I think that even if you solve the problem with there not being enough doctors for the emergency room, social acceptation of saying like, okay, we will have just a lot more people in the IC, which will then also include many younger people actually. Already now, about half of the people in IC is under 50. We will just have their 12,000 at a time and keep doing that as long as it's necessary. I don't think people will accept that. On the other hand, people will also, of course, not accept a lockdown forever. So that's really speculation. I mean, I can't say what will happen. I am personally more, I think the much better bet for now is there will at some point, it's highly likely that there will be a vaccine at some point. It might take a long time. And you might, I am very cautiously optimistic that one might have a lot less stringent lockdown measures within regions until that vaccine happens, as long as there is no travel. So I think the tourism industry and traveling, that will be blocked for a very long time, or you would have to go in quarantine. But if you get R below 1, it might be possible to get large regions where it's just not there anymore, and then you could really lift most measures there. Or maybe I'm too optimistic, but that seems to me more realistic than just trying to burn through, as they call it, burn the virus through the population to speed up the herd immunity. But it's all speculation. That's, unfortunately, I cannot say more about it than that.
All right, thanks. I think Peter Bonks, you are now unmuted. You also wanted to add something.
Yeah, it was the question by Abdallah. So Martin, because Abdallah asked whether the system would not be prone to noise by people self-reporting ill. Well, that's, I think, but you can. That would be the case if it would be self-reporting. But you can also envision that this is coupled to an official test, so a GGD test. So you would only be able to report if you have a positive test. I think that is well. It depends on how you want to use this technology, but that would be also a reasonable thing to do, actually.
But this also assumes that those tests are final, and there's some research that shows that people get reinfected, and then if they don't know that they need to be retested by the GGD, for example, then you're allowing a potential super spreader back into the community, while these apps are telling you, no, this is a safe zone, which may bring the R0 back up. Yeah,
well, I mean, the fact that tests are not 100% reliable is true, but that is a fact that we will have to face regardless whether we're using mobile phones for helping contact tracing or whether we do contact tracing without apps. Then you would have exactly the same issue. So it's also important to get the test more accurate, I suppose.
I maybe have one short question for Peter Grunwald. So Peter, you mentioned that there is some uncertainty, right, in some of the parameters, and that this uncertainty could have a significant impact. Have you been involved, or have others been involved in the people actually measuring these parameters, like the data acquisition, or trying to steer that to reduce the uncertainty? Seems Peter's muted. I will unmute him.
Ah, now it works. Yeah, sorry. I didn't get an unmute button, but now it's there. I have not been involved in that myself. What is so REVM is evidently testing or trying to estimate R0. Unfortunately, we cannot really get the exact method and data they use. People are very frustrated about that. So Peter Bonks has to correct me if that's still the case.
Yeah, where we don't have those data sets.
Yeah.
The RIVM bases itself on this interview data they asked the people for the day of the first infection. That is where they base their R0 on.
Yeah, and their basic methods, but they have refined it very much. There's a paper from 2004 where they explain some basic method, which is based on this information, like days until you you trace back until when you got infected. Yeah, but that's unfortunately we don't really know the details. Yeah.
All right, thanks. I think also the meeting has been very long and I think very successful. It has been really interesting to hear basically on about your research and about from the PhD students before. But maybe it's time to round up. I guess the channel will remain open for a bit, so if people want to continue chatting, that's fine. But let's thank our speakers. So I will unmute everybody and then give a little hand of applause. So let's